Hello, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Beyond Compliance. We're rounding out September, almost getting into Q4 here already. My name is Aaron Bolshaw with Safety Change Software, and I'm the moderator of Beyond Compliance. For those that may be with us the first time, Beyond Compliance is a periodic industry update for process manufacturers. The goal, simple, really just to bring you insights around the market that shape the way we grow our businesses, deliver quality products to customers, mitigate supply chain risk, and safeguard our brands, all while improving yields and maximizing productivity, a tall order indeed that we all have in our plants. So today we're reviewing a very important topic as we head into the 2022 planning season, and it's key performance indicators for manufacturing. The sponsor for the Beyond Compliance is Safety Change Software. It's the #1 plant management platform trusted by over 1,500 manufacturing facilities to improve yield, maximize productivity, and ensure compliance. We are scheduled for about an hour today, and so we got a lot of great information to cover with some very compelling stories and some information. But with that, you can hear us, we can't hear you, but we do want to hear from you. So if you have questions, please ask them through the presentation. As you think of something, just jot it down using that console on your right. There's a little questions panel that you'll want to use. We'll be covering questions, as many of them as we can get to at the end of the program. So everyone's favorite question, I'll answer it right off the top of the hour here. Yes, you can get the slides and the recording from today. All you have to do is just ask and we'll follow up with you and we'll make sure you get that and you can share it with your teams. So with that, I would like to introduce today's presenter. Dennis Devos is the advisor and senior fellow at Devos Associates. Extensive lean background. Okay, so he's a fellow of ASQ, a very much well-known authority on quality management, lean methods, audits, cost of quality. He's been writing books now, contributing to the ASQ Certified Quality Auditor Handbook and the Quality Manager Handbook, and he offers a lot of training and advisory services for that QA and operations for manufacturing sectors, a deep background in automotive and many other sectors as well. So welcome again, Dennis, to the Beyond Compliance.
Hey, thanks very much, Aaron. It's wonderful to be back with you this afternoon.
Yes, absolutely. So you're covering a great topic. I love this because we're kind of coming into that classical, planning season, if you will, for 2022 as we head into October. Some people have already, they're looking at their fiscals a little bit differently, but by and large, planning is starting. And I think, when we cover topics like key performance indicators, it seems like people, operationally, production-wise, safety-wise, people just keep piling on the performance indicators, but we really should be focusing on the K in KPI, right?
Absolutely, and that's actually one of the first things that I'm going to talk about. So yeah, sometimes we overdo it, and we want to work smarter, not harder.
Right. Well, listen, before we get into the meat of this, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your company and how you help the industry?
All right. Well, thank you very much, and welcome everybody to our webinar. I provide consulting and advisory services to a variety of industries, including pharmaceutical, food, and beverage packaging mostly. I work on quality management, environmental management, 9001, 14001. We work with clients on strategic planning and metrics. That's what brings us here today. Lean methods, problem solving, corrective action, and providing internal audit services for management systems. We also provide a variety of training programs around these same topics, but including new product introduction, statistical methods, SPC, FMEA, and HACCP, and internal auditor training if any of you have needs around your quality or environmental or even food safety management systems for internal auditor training. I do have several clients in the food and beverage packaging industry, corrugated, box board, rigid plastics, and work with clients in the areas of corn sweeteners and ethanol for alcohol and for fuel additives too. So if it's okay with all of you, I'm going to just jump in and get started. So again, welcome. It's wonderful to be here with Safety Chain and their Beyond Compliance webinar series. We're going to be talking a little bit about key performance indicators and differentiating KPIs from more garden variety process metrics. We'll spend some time talking about the selection of KPIs really being driven by and aligned with what's important to your business and your business strategy. We'll talk about examples. We'll talk about tips for selecting the right metrics for your organization. And then we'll be talking about leading and lagging indicators and using leading indicators as a way of really finding those KPIs that most manufacturers seem to be missing. It wouldn't be a very credible presentation unless I gave you definitions. So key performance indicators are a quantifiable level of achieving a critical objective, and this comes from the ISO 22400 standard. And not every practitioner would maybe approach it this way, but to me, the K in KPI actually means something. These are key performance indicators. These are aggregated metrics. And I differentiate key performance indicators from what I just sort of call local performance indicators. A little bit lower level, sort of process level, things that are important for each of us at the process level, at the management level, to drive and manage our own local processes. But these local performance indicators are not all of that important to, you know, our leadership and the C-suite. We can start with what is a process. Processes at any level are a set of interacting activities using resources that use inputs to deliver an output. And this is where all of our businesses start. All of the things that we do, whether in business or in our life, is the result of a process. And we can use critical control points to monitor and measure and control processes at key points. Depending on the nature of the process, we'll sort of determine where you might have those controls. But in a general sense, we can have controls or inspections at an input level. In food and beverage, of course, we would have very good controls on our input raw materials. There can be a variety of in-process control points. And then finally, some output controls, final inspections, et cetera, et cetera. Before we can talk about the proper metrics for a process or the proper key performance indicators for an organization, we have to start at the very lowest level with processes that are designed to deliver some output. If we were to begin or launch a new company, we would need to know, what does our customer want? What our customer wants is the output. And then we design and create a process to deliver that output, that product or service to our customers, whatever it is. There's an expected output, what the customer wants, that optimal output that the process is designed to achieve. Now, we know that our actual output may not be exactly the expected output. We may not deliver exactly what our customer wants. And if you think about it, this is not really the official definition of quality, but this is how I think about it. Quality is really that comparison of actual output to expected output. In a production sense, it's efficiency, it's a lot of other things. But if I'm thinking about an output vis-a-vis a customer expectation, did I meet that need, yes or no? and a gap, if there's a gap between what I wanted to achieve for my customer and what I actually achieved, that gap we could think of as quality.
Yeah, and I think it's good to, I think, Dennis, just take the temperature of everyone really quick as we sort of start in here. We want to ask you a quick question. So everyone on their screen, in a second, you're going to see a poll pop up, okay? And I'm going to give you a little bit of time to answer that. And be honest, right? What we just want to do is ask you very simply, which of the following KPIs, right? Are you currently tracking in your plant operations? Revenue, and you can check any or all, right? So are you tracking revenue per labor hour? That's a common one. Raw material yield, it's a good one. Downtime, scrap, rework, are you scorecarding that? Are you tracking that as a KPI? How about OEE, overall equipment effectiveness? And I'm going to let this sit here for just a minute, Dennis, so that people can answer. We've got about only 30% voting. Go ahead and put it in there and let us know which ones. Now, if you were to say, just guessing, Dennis, which one of these comes out on top? Which do you think most people will say they're tracking?
Aha, you're putting me on the spot.
Yeah.
Everybody tracks downtime and scrap and rework.
Yeah.
Maybe that's my quality background talking, but we'll see. I don't want to taint the results.
That's okay. I think you're onto something. We were at Pack Expo this week down in Las Vegas, and we just had one simple question for everybody, and it got a chuckle. So, are you guys having any unplanned downtime events? And it was kind of like, of course we are. It's one of those things. But let me close the poll, and I'm going to let everyone see the results really quick. I'll share them on your screen here in just a second. They'll pop up. And you're absolutely right, Dennis. So you said downtime and scrap and rework.
Right.
Those are absolutely going to be those a couple of those foundational ones. Interesting that revenue per labor hour and OEE kind of on the back there. Raw material yield also nice, very good. So I appreciate everyone's voting. We'll hide those votes. We'll hide those results now, and we'll resume back to the presentation. But the process metrics are kind of the next part here to this. Is that right?
Right on. Thanks. That's wonderful, and I love that poll. Thank you for doing that for us. I actually have a slide further down on OEE because maybe it's because I'm a lean practitioner. That's one of my favorite aggregate KPIs, and we'll touch on that as we move through the presentation. Right. So we were talking about the process metrics in terms of, whoops, the degree to which a process delivers an intended output, right? So we talked about that in terms of quality. Now we can measure that quality, can't we? We can measure the gap between what we actually get and what we were expected to get. And of course, our lower level processes must be managed in order to meet our higher level strategic objectives. An example there, right? We have cost controls in hundreds of processes that each roll up to a single profit metric at the corporate level. In these next few slides, I really want to emphasize how important it is for flowing down the results of Hoshin planning, the results of our strategies. We're not going to have appropriate KPIs until we know the strategic direction of the business. So it starts at the highest level. It starts at strategic objectives. Then the strategic objectives, we then have operational objectives, and we measure operational results against those objectives. Then below the operation, we have individual process results. And then you can go right to the individual person level. Many companies have some sort of employee development planning, some annual performance appraisals, etc., goals and objectives for individual employees. And this slide is really meant to show that cascading down of metrics, that alignment of goals and objectives, I should say, from the strategic level all the way down through departments, individual processes, right to individual people. And we want to make sure that our goals and objectives at every level are aligned. The things that you have been asked to do at a personal level in your annual goals and objectives ought to be traceable and ought to align with the very highest strategic level objectives of the organization. And then the key performance indicators are those measures that drive and measure success towards those objectives. Our metrics are derived from strategic planning, as I just said, and I won't spend a lot of time on this, but some of you may have seen the X matrix. It's a common tool for deriving and depicting strategic objectives, tactical objectives. And then once we know what our objectives are, once we know what our strategic initiatives and our tactics are to achieve those objectives, then we can create, define appropriate targets and appropriate metrics then that will tell us the degree to which we're meeting those objectives. And we cascade, as I said in the previous slide, we cascade those objectives and we cascade those metrics all the way down throughout the levels of the organization. Now, I'm an engineer, so I love to measure things to the 4th decimal point. And sometimes when we talk about metrics, we think that they have to be, ultra quantifiable, ultra measurable, ultra variable. And I want to just say at this point that, especially when it comes to things like customer satisfaction, it's hard to put a number on something like customer satisfaction. And we don't want to shy away from those things that might be important in our organization simply because they're a little bit fuzzy and a little bit hard to measure. Don't just trust me. Dr. Deming said it himself. Sometimes we have to settle for inexact measures of exactly the right things. And this is one of my all-time favorite quotes from Dr. Deming. When it comes to customer satisfaction, sometimes it's just, thumbs up, thumbs down. You're more taking the temperature, getting a vibe, and that's okay. We decide what are those things we need to measure, exactly the right things, and then we derive the best way to measure them that we can. I'm reminded of a story. I called several years ago. I called Delta Airlines for some reason, and I'm on the phone with the lady from Delta Airlines, and at the end of the call, a little automated voice came on and it said, "Stay on the line if you would like to participate in a 1-question survey." And I thought, now I never participate in surveys, right? There's just so many of them, but I was intrigued. I thought, a 1-question survey, I got to hear what this one question is. So I stayed on the line, and the question in their 1-question survey was, if you were the owner of an organization, would you hire the person you just talked to? I thought, wow.
That's a great question.
Isn't that incredible? And I holy smokes, doesn't that one question capture so much, like that inexact measure? But that I was really, and I tell that story. It's a great example. And be creative, right? One question like that, measuring exactly the right thing. Objectives versus metrics. Sometimes we get these terms confused. Objectives obviously are what we want to accomplish, right? And usually it includes a performance target of some sort. The metrics then are the measurables, the data that evaluates progress towards that objective. So we make that differentiation. Oops. And we have some examples, right, of operational metrics or more tactics and initiatives. Sales, profit, cash flow, market share, customer satisfaction, throughput, yield, efficiency, sales per labor hour, even cost of poor quality. These are metrics at a higher level, right? These are enterprise level, company level metrics that most companies will track. These metrics at a more tactical level, right? The tactics, the initiatives that we put in place to achieve strategic objectives, these would be more these, what I refer to as localized measures. A particular program timing or budget at a lower level, at a project level, meeting milestones at a project level, hiring required talent. A lot of organizations live and die by the quality of the talent that they have on their staff.
Mm-hmm.
Should that be something we measure? Team turnover. Depending on the team, it can be a hugely disruptive and hugely expensive to hire new people and react to team turnover. Maybe a number of root cause analysis or improvement tasks done, recognizing that those roll up into enterprise level improvements and savings. Reduction initiatives to reduce the cost of poor quality, et cetera, et cetera. Now, no presentation on management metrics would be complete without talking about conflicting metrics. You want to be so careful that you don't have different metrics in different areas of your organization that conflict with each other. That will drive the wrong behaviors. I have a couple or three examples here. In your organization, your purchasing department is probably rewarded for keeping raw material inventory costs low. But now production is missing the materials that they need, and this leads to downtime and late customer deliveries. So at the end of the year, the purchasing manager gets a raise because he kept those costs so low, but the production manager gets fired because they could never meet production targets.
Yeah.
A very common KPI in a customer call center is to keep each call cycle time low, right? We don't want to spend a lot of time. We need throughput. We have calls per hour. Now, my call center cycle time might be low. Maybe it's less than 1 minute per call, but my customers are frustrated because I'm not getting them the information they need. I'm just pushing them off of my line, either hanging up or escalating, punting them from department to department, and my customer satisfaction suffers. If, by the way, you've been frustrated by a call center in the past where they keep shuffling you from person to person to person, this might be why.
Yeah.
Individual call times have to be low. What's this third one? Engineering salary targets are met. Oh yes, but the number of new products and the time to market metrics suffer. I either don't have enough engineering talent or the talent that I have is insufficient. So be so careful when choosing these metrics, and I'll talk at the end of the presentation about how metrics drive behavior. And we don't want our metrics driving the wrong behavior because we're chasing our own annual performance bonus.
Right, and this leads to the whole theory of unintended consequences. And one of the things that enterprises quickly learn is if you put something in like a conflicting metric like this, you have to be able to turn it off really quick once you see the unintended consequences. If it's just you're blind to it, you don't see it, you have to be able to adjust quickly or suffer the consequence.
Absolutely. Absolutely, and that actually introduces something that I don't talk about in this presentation, but metrics should be evaluated from time to time, right? Some metrics may need to be added, others may need to be taken away, right? So don't just set a set of metrics and then, for 10 years or more, you don't look at them. So the metrics themselves may need to be refreshed. So very good, thank you for that. So let's talk a little bit about leading and lagging indicators. A lot of you have probably seen this before, but a lot of the things that we track as key performance indicators are lagging indicators, measuring something that has happened in the past, such as customer satisfaction, lost time injuries, even profit and loss, right? So many of these things are judging what happened before. Customer satisfaction tells you how well they liked the transactions they had with you in the past. It might be a predictor of future customer loyalty. But let's think about leading indicators. Can we measure things that predict KPIs? If I want to watch my profits are lagging indicators, what do I do from a cost controls perspective? Right? What do I do to save money throughout the year so that at the end of the year I show a profit, right? So there's a relationship between leading and lagging indicators. These leading indicators are predictive. They measure an input variable that influences the lagging indicator. For example, a level of training for frontline staff may increase customer satisfaction, or the number of people wearing PPE will reduce the amount of industries. So it's important, first of all, to establish cause and effect. And then, of course, leading and lagging indicators have to be related. So in this example, if I measure my level of frontline staff training and my level of frontline staff skill and ability and their courtesy to customers and their helpfulness and their cheerfulness and all of these things, and we know that that will influence customer satisfaction, well then if we take care of staff level training, customer satisfaction, at least on that dimension, takes care of itself. If we know that PPE is correlated to a reduction in lost time injuries, well, let's track the amount of PPE compliance, and lost time injury levels fall, for the most part, take care of themselves. So when I talk a little bit of, well, the title of this presentation was, key performance indicators that manufacturers might be missing. In large part, what you might be missing are a proper understanding of these leading indicators and a proper measurement and control of these leading indicators. Some more examples. Lagging indicators are profit. A leading indicator that will influence profit might be cost reduction targets. I track those, the profit takes care of itself. Lagging indicators might be time to market for new products. A leading indicator might be the number of engineering changes. The fewer the engineering changes, the faster I get to market. Warranty. A leading indicator might be the number of QC rejections, influencing the type of product defects that might get out to the field. On-time delivery. We all track on-time delivery. Leading indicators could include machinery downtime or internal schedule attainment. If I have a good schedule and I always meet my internal schedule, I'm never late. The lagging indicator takes care of itself. This last one is a personal example of mine. I'm a member of the ASQ, as Aaron said, and I'm a member leader in the quality management division. And we track the number of members we have in our division, and we track member retention. And we have a very high turnover rate. It's as high as 50% over the first 2 years. People join ASQ, they join our division, and then for reasons that we try to determine, they leave. And we decided, or we discovered a few years ago, that members of our society stay members if they feel like they're engaged. If they feel like, other members of the ASQ have reached out to them. And that kind of makes sense. So now, in a deliberate way, we reach out to new members and we reach out to existing members throughout the year. in deliberate ways. The engagement we measure as touch points for new members. And we invite them in special emails to them personally to say, hey, we're having a webinar, maybe one like this. Please attend. And we have seen our retention rates climb 25 to 35% over the last 5 years, because we understand and establish that relationship between member engagement and member retention. So now we put tactics in place to reach out, count the number of touch points where we're talking to new and existing members. So we should move from lagging to leading. As strategic planning, operations, and process measurement matures, your organization should adopt more leading indicators. And that is one of the key messages of this presentation today. Like I said, when you manage the leading indicators, the lagging indicators take care of themselves. But make sure you truly have established that relationship, that cause and effect. The balanced scorecard, just a quick mention and a nod to Kaplan and Norton, right, from the Harvard Business Review. A lot of you have heard of the balanced scorecard. The idea behind the balanced scorecard is just that we have to worry about more than money, and we need to manage more than money. Mm-hmm. So the balanced scorecard takes many forms, but the traditional form is a balance between financial measures, customer measures, customer satisfaction measures, operational measures, and then things like learning and growth. And you could choose your own. But we recognize that successful businesses have to be good at many things, not just profit and loss. And there's great benefit to creating your own balanced scorecard rather than just, grabbing one off the internet. Make it part of your strategic planning process, have a lot of stakeholders involved. And that's all we'll say about that, but think about it if you don't already have one. The last thing I want to say about strategic objectives driving metrics is just to let you think a little bit about how different organizations that in different markets that do different things might have different metrics. If I'm a manufacturer of low-cost coffee cups, maybe styrofoam coffee cups, my strategic plans, my directions, my objectives, my key performance indicators will probably be different than a company that manufactures high-end computer chips. A lot of us live in the manufacturing world. What would the KPIs look like at a company like Uber or Airbnb? These virtual companies that don't even have assets. What would KPIs look like at Walmart, a typical bricks and mortar retailer, versus Amazon? They'd be different. What about professional services like law firms, accounting firms? So we think about the business we're in, the strategies we have, and adopt appropriate metrics. So this slide is just meant to say not all companies may track the same things, and that's perfectly fine. In fact, that would be required. I want to comment on corporate metrics. I work a lot with clients who are part of larger multinational firms. And when we talk about cost of poor quality, or we talk about, key performance metrics, I'm talking with a plant manager and I say, shouldn't you track X or Y or Z? And sometimes the answer is, yes, Dennis, I agree with you, we ought to track that, but corporate doesn't care about that. Well, all right, so you care, track it yourself, right? Site metrics roll up to corporate metrics, of course they do, but let's recognize that the corporation may want certain information in a certain format that's not useful to the site. You're right. Never let your corporate metrics and your corporate directives stand in the way of what you need to drive your business. I constantly, that's why I created this slide. I constantly get that answer. Well, this metric's not that useful, but I have to report it to corporate. All right, fine. Why don't you count it in a different way that matters to you? Right? You're the plant manager. You have to manage your plant.
Yeah.
You don't have to share this information with corporate, but you need it. Yeah.
What strikes me about this, Dennis, is that there's always something that, there's this almost ethos about, well, corporate knows everything. That's not true. You're going to learn things at the plant level much, much faster. And when you learn those things and you're measuring them and they become a KPI for the corporation, you'll feel good about that. You surfaced that, right? It's not just doing what they say, it's, manage you own, it's that ownership part you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah, recognize, these corporate reports for what they are. They're important to corporate, but they may be less important to you. So measure what you need to be successful. And I should not have to say that. It should sound pretty obvious, but yeah, you're absolutely right, Aaron. That's a very great point. Whoops. So select the right metrics. Don't overdo it. KPIs must be key. I was doing a lean project with a company down in Dallas a few years ago, and they were part of a multinational corporation, and the plant manager said, we have 35 KPIs. It's 35. Then they can't all be very key. And he laughed, right? So recognize the difference between key performance indicators and these local metrics. Both are important, but they're not the same thing. And be careful of what really is important versus the nice to have. Right? I think Aaron said this at the beginning of our presentation, right? The companies love to pile on the metrics, and then there's more chance that they conflict with each other. Decide what matters. So those critical factors that drive success, those are the KPIs. When you're selecting the metrics, think about whether or not it's easy or difficult to get at the data, right? Data acquisition has a cost. And then think of the reliability of data. How many of us, when looking at data, the first thing we ask ourselves is this real? Can we trust it? So think about the degree of difficulty in getting the data you want and the reliability of that data. And like I said before, don't be afraid of those inexact measures of exactly the right things. We focus on strategic objectives. We have that alignment from the strategic level all the way down through departments, processes, right to individual people. Make sure the metrics measure what you want them to measure, that they're accurate. That sounds obvious, but a lot of times you find out that the data you've got doesn't actually measure performance the way that you thought it did. Deploy your metrics throughout the organization, like we said, and let's challenge ourselves to find more leading indicators to predict those lagging results. Don't overdo it, right? How many of you have seen these graphical dashboards, like maybe the one on the left? I'm a pretty smart guy, but I don't know what any of that means, but it looks cool. How about the one on the right? This dashboard tells you at a glance what's going on. And I'm not that smart. I like this one on the right. That's all we'll say about that. I have a couple of slides here on overlooked KPIs. OEE. What I think I said at the beginning, if I didn't, I'll say it now. Good KPIs are aggregated measures, right? Like they're aggregated. Things roll up. Mm-hmm. So instead of tracking 3 individual metrics like availability, quality, or performance, I can aggregate those as an OEE and get a single number. OEE is kind of the sum of availability, the percentage of scheduled time that equipment is available. Some of us call that uptime. Quality, right? Just percent of good units per produced. Sometimes that's a first pass yield. And performance, basically efficiency, right? The speed or the throughput as a percentage of its designed or process standard. So we combine these three metrics into one. At a KPI level, at a leadership level, this is an important index. At the lower level, right, each department, each process now has to track those localized measures that then roll up into OEE. And it's often used in multinational corporations to track or compare performance across all the different plants. And then, of course, 100% OEE would mean all good parts produced at maximum speed without interruption.
Which is nearly impossible, we should say, to get. I've yet to meet anyone that says, yeah, we're at 100. No way.
Yeah, even high 80s is about the best you're going to get in many cases. Yeah. Another overlooked aggregate KPI, the cost of quality or the cost of poor quality. If some of you attended my webinar about 6 weeks ago, you'll remember this topic and maybe this slide. We can track the cost of non-conformance, right? That's the cost of poor quality. We can look at the costs of warranty, sorting, customer satisfaction, right? Replacing wrong orders or defective products. We can look at the cost of internal failure, scrap, rework, etc. We can look at the conformance costs, sort of the investment we make in assuring quality. Or in the food industry, right, the cost of assuring food safety, HACCP, things of that nature too. So these are two overlooked KPIs that your company could use if you're not already using them, OEE and cost of quality. A couple of slides here on the psychology of metrics, and then we'll be wrapping up. When used correctly, the metrics can help us understand and manage the business. And of course, that's the goal. That's why we put metrics in place. But we want to be careful, right? We reward, or what gets rewarded gets repeated. And if we're measuring processes and maybe personal goals and objectives and maybe annual bonuses and other things, if the metrics drive those things, they may drive people's behavior, good or bad. And the metrics, the things that we measure, may cause people to ignore other important factors. And those metrics may be manipulated to further their personal goals. And we know that that can be true. So again, another consideration in the choice of metrics. Think about the degree to which they could be manipulated, gaming the system, etc. We want to reinforce the right behaviors rather than drive bad ones. We talked about conflicting metrics earlier, right? We don't want conflicting metrics to have one department succeed at the expense of another. Never okay. Are there too many metrics causing overload? And at some point, people might just start ignoring them. Do people know how to respond to metrics as they increase or decrease? Do they have an appropriate reaction plan? Do they know what the metrics mean? And how do they react? So please be careful that we don't drive the wrong behaviors. People can game the metrics. Go on, admit it. You've probably done it yourself. We all have. We set easy targets for ourselves, or we play to the test. One of the criticisms of standardized testing for students is that the teacher all year, right, just teaches and manages the curriculum around what that standardized test at the end of the year looks like, right? So we teach the test so that our students look better, regardless of whether or not they've actually learned anything or had a positive learning experience, right? It's all about the test. We can accelerate activities or we can delay activities, especially when we have month-end reporting or quarter-end reporting. I know of a company, this is a true story, I know of a company that literally was shipping product on October the 32nd. They actually, and I said, you can't be serious. That doesn't even exist. And they said, well, it would be fraudulent to call it October the 31st. True story.
Wow.
So that's what we do, right? At the end of the month, we slow down to push something into the next month. We've all done it. Misleading graphs with exaggerated scales. Aggregates versus segmentation, right? We talked about that. Now, so let's say I have an aggregated customer satisfaction metric and it shows 90%. And I have, 10 customers or something, and my aggregate value is 90%. Well, a 90% customer satisfaction across 10 customers can mask the fact that I've got one customer down around 65, one of the customers that doesn't like me, right? So be careful there when we aggregate or segment in ways that are meant to kind of, right, hide the truth. Sometimes, we have our monthly meetings and our department heads are asked to make presentations. Of course, we're biased towards emphasizing good news while downplaying or outright ignoring bad news, right? So let's not do that. So again, I know all of you are familiar with this, but I just feel it's important to point this out because we see this behavior. Select good metrics and watch for this. Our frequently looked KPIs, more examples of leading indicators versus lagging indicators. On-time delivery. Our internal KPI should be internal schedule attainment. If we always meet our internal schedule, we'll never be late. Weight gain. I'm trying to lose a little weight, so I'm trying to watch my calories per day. Quality defects. If we know that quality defects are correlated with employee training and experience, I can have more training. I can track the hours of training and the amount of training my employees get. Quality defects should go down. Product dissatisfaction. So maybe I'm in a business where I have field service and I install equipment. And I know that if I spend more time with more users during installation, they have a more positive experience with our product. So we do that. The leading indicator, we track the quality of our field service, and that leads to better customer satisfaction. New product revenue. Maybe that's a function of reducing my product introduction cycle time, get more products per year. So that's what I manage. Machinery downtime, we talked about that. On-time preventive maintenance. MTTR stands for mean time to repair. A lot of folks want to talk about mean time between failures, and that's okay. But what's the time to repair? When I do have a breakdown, I want to make sure my maintenance guys run to the machine and that each breakdown is fixed quickly. I find that more useful than mean time between failure. Sure, it's good to have fewer failure events, but when I do fail, I want to get it fixed right away. And I used my example of volunteer retention, the leading indicator of those touch points with new members. So, in conclusion, start with your strategy, deploy your tactics and your metrics down. Everything must be aligned. Your metrics must be based on sound data. Your metrics must measure the right things. Avoid conflicting metrics. Recognize the psychology of performance measurement. Watch for the things we just talked about, and don't let your metrics drive the wrong behaviors. And continue to refine and refresh your KPIs and your local metrics. Are we measuring the right things? And my challenge to you here today is to find leading indicators for each of your existing lagging indicators. Track the leading indicators, and the laggards take care of themselves.
Yeah, I tell you what, it's interesting the amount of times we can't separate the noise from the signal. Sometimes we've got so much data going around, right? From the machines on our floor to maybe you're collecting data by humans on paper, and how do you put it all together, and what's the right actual real life story of how well things are going. It's no wonder, this is a hard topic, right, Dennis? So
Absolutely, absolutely, well said. Do we have some questions? I'd love to talk about this with questions from our attendees.
yeah, we've got a couple of questions. So the first one I've got is, it's kind of it sounds personal, but hey, you hit on it earlier. We have a hard time connecting frontline workers with strategic goals and then they say outside of incentive and pay, what are other ways to improve this? So I think that was the Hoshin slide that I think this came in at, right? Where you got that sort of waterfall down and up
Right.
effect. You improve that?
Well, it's about employee motivation. And you'll be happy to know that the things that motivate people actually don't cost anything.
Mm-hmm.
People want to feel like they're part of a team. So if we let people know what our corporate strategy is and what our departmental goals are, and we let people know how they play a part, right? Everybody's a small cog in a big machine, and we want people to recognize and we want people to know that their contribution matters. So that would be part of it. People will also be more motivated when they have a positive working environment. And that can be everything from a workspace that's well lit to safe, of course, to the quality of the team that they work with. Right? Again, people want to be part of a team if there's some sense of camaraderie. So nobody's more cynical than I am, full disclosure, but just thinking that we're going to throw more money at people to motivate them and get better results, that's not right. So think about motivation, right? Go to Wikipedia, read a book on motivation, and you'll find those things out. Positive feedback, right? We love to give people negative feedback when things go wrong, but tell them about the good things, celebrate success. If they work a little harder or they get a little bit of extra productivity or yield, celebrate that.
Yeah.
Thank them, thank the whole department.
Yep. I think those are good. I think communication also comes into play, especially top down, right? When you can build that culture of that success. When you have not just your department or maybe your plant celebrating that success, but if you get, say, a CEO, right, to send a quick message on video, guys, it's not hard. Go ask them, hey, we just hit 150% a goal or whatever for the first time. Can you send us a little shout out? Don't be afraid. As a plant manager or a manager of a department, go ask for that. You'd be surprised at how willing executives are to celebrate those wins, and it's very easy. It's a very short piece of time for them to be able to do. I'd add one more thing, Dennis, standards and dashboards. So, you saw some really weird dashboards and stuff like that, but standardizing the data across facilities, lines, and shifts, and then showing dashboards also helps to get people to connect with the bigger picture, that strategic part of it too, because it's not like, oh, we've got our own set of sort of numbers over here in, say, Detroit, and then, well, over here in, Oakland, we've got this other sort of thing going on. So it's not apples to apples. But when you standardize things, it really gives people that incentive to sort of cooperatively compete.
Absolutely, that was well said. And thank you, because I forgot maybe to say that. The other thing is, we said people want to feel a part of the team. People also, to your point, Aaron, people want to feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves, right? So they're part of a bigger plant. They're part of a bigger worldwide corporation, right? So these connection with the metrics and connection with other teams and other sites that you just described is also motivating for folks. They feel like they're part of something bigger than just themselves.
Yep, good point. Our next question here came up. I think you hit a soft spot, Dennis. Jared says we have too many metrics, 28 of them. So the KPIs is what he's referring to.
Right.
How would you recommend paring them down? How do you start to whittle down or start to focus on the ones that are the actual keys?
Yeah, of course, it's hard to answer that directly in this example, but what I've found is that a lot of the things that people are calling KPIs, they sort of commingle KPIs with what I'm calling these localized measures, right? So for example, we have on-time calibration, and it's a KPI, it's reported at the plant level. Well, no, nobody cares about, calibration is important, but nobody needs to care about that except the person who runs the calibration lab. So that's not a KPI. It's important, but not at the higher levels. So start with that. That would be my advice. Take a look at those KPIs and try to sort out those that might be more key performance indicators from the ones that are more local, and split those up. And you might be able to knock out 10 or a dozen just by doing that.
Okay, that's a good point. I don't know if this would work, and so I want you as the expert, Dennis, to push back on me. I've often gone to teams, not a manufacturing setting, but I've gone to teams to sort of crowdsource this. Like, your teams are going to know. Your teams as a whole should be much smarter than you as the manager. And I've given everyone a silver bullet and have gone to teams and said, hey, if you had to pick one of these off and it's just no longer valid, what would that one be? You'd be surprised if you get congruence around a few of those KPIs. If let's say 28 out of your, or let's say 5 of those KPIs out of that 28, everyone picks to go, you may have some success starting with those and paring it down so that you are focusing on the others that matter more.
I like that too. Right on.
And then a quick question about OEE. There was that came in sort of trying to connect OEE. It's its own KPI. They didn't really understand how it affected the overall, like the productivity, like the percentage, right? So if you look at it on the surface, Dennis, it's a math equation, right? And I can go back to this one really quick if I can find it. So there it is. So it's availability times quality times performance, and that's how you get to that percentage. That final percentage is the math equation. They didn't understand how to connect that with the overall the actual productivity, like kind of the throughput, right? Can you kind of summarize that maybe a little bit? And then I've got a quick story to share on how OEE affected another very key performance indicator.
So the question is about how OEE measures performance?
Yeah, throughput almost, like, hey, how, it's a percentage, but it won't correlate with the increase in productivity, right? So if you have an OEE,
it's indirect, because each of these on their own are a measure of productivity, right? So if I have low availability because my machines are always breaking down, that degrades my throughput. I get fewer units. Yep. If it's quality and I've got all kinds of defects, I'm getting fewer units. And then performance, right? If my machines are running too slow, I get fewer units. So yes, each of these are independent sort of variables, and a lot of folks track these three things independently. The OEE then aggregates them so that it's one number on the dashboard rather than three.
Right.
Yeah.
Got it. And we found something very interesting. We deployed Safety Chains OEE into one of our customers' facilities down in San Diego. Very, multi global corporation, very successful in the food world. And they found something really interesting, and I didn't see it in here, but the T-max, if anyone deals with theoretical maxes on your lines or even equipment, sometimes you can kind of pull it down to that. Your T-max, this is something that we learned after 2 days of deploying OEE with SPC. So we did statistical process charting for the quality side as well, and the in-process checks and the HACCP and so forth. What they learned in 2 days is that their theoretical max on that throughput, Dennis, which had been set at, it was like 540 or something, like forever. They immediately, 2 days, knew, we have the wrong T-max. We have the wrong ceiling in mind. They increased their T-max 40%, and now they're operating to that level, right?
Oh my God.
So sometimes these things can really open up your eyes, the OEE plus the SPC, and it was immediate. They were like, we had this assumption of the T-max. And so we had a great time talking with them at a recent conference of ours, and it was just really fun to kind of dig into the details. So you will find some silver bullets with some of these technologies, OEE, SPC, something like that. You may find that it will overturn some of your assumptions for sure.
That's incredible. That's incredible. I'd not heard of that. It's almost like cost of poor quality, right? Once we show people how to measure it, they realize their losses are much higher than they ever thought.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, Dennis, this has been great. We're a couple minutes over. That's okay. We still have a bunch of people on the phone. There's one last question I would hate to miss, and it was from Matt. And he says, what are some signs to be on the lookout to determine that a current KPI or measurement is ineffective? Like, what's something you could say to say, hey, maybe that's not the one to go with? Anything you could offer?
Well, it might be, to the example you used about the new T-max. You might have to, as you realize a new level of performance beyond which you even thought was possible, you may have to add a metric, or you may subtract a metric. I'm trying to think of a specific example. Sometimes it's more just a matter of metrics outweigh their usefulness. So for example, I have an initiative for scrap reduction. Mm-hmm. So I have a project. I'm going to count the scrap in a certain way, maybe more than I would with other products, or differently than I would with other products. And then my scrap reduction initiative is over with, and I don't stop collecting all that data. Right. So sometimes when we add inspections for something that's meant to be short term, or we add process measures that are meant to be, for some type of project that's short term, we don't always get rid of those, and these hang around. You might think in those terms too.
Yeah. I'd offer one other indicator, Matt, for you. I tell you what, if you put something in place and you've got your team's eye on it and everyone's looking at it, and you, a couple weeks later, you see some fatigue around that. Like if you actually think that your labor force is not really happy about it, start asking questions. You may have one of those, unintended consequences, and it might be conflicting with the actual metric that you want to get. Because if you're saying, hey, we need to do 40% more of this or whatever it is, and you've got soreness on your labor force, right? So you're working them more, it was unintended, that will quickly backfire. That's where people will start to get those loopholes, right, and start gaming the system like Dennis was talking about. All right. Well, Dennis, we got some other things coming up. Wanted to tell people about October 7th, solving standard costing problems with lean accounting. We've got a great customer success story ourselves with Grupo Navis, also known as Caribbean Produce. They are using they're using digital transformation to achieve a strategic growth initiative. It's amazing. They're doing this across their brands and having great success. And then we've got some OEE. Hey, speaking of OEE, we've got a couple of courses coming up as well for us in November. So look forward to that. Dennis, as always, this has been absolutely fantastic. Wonderful to have you aboard again, and thank you very much for your time.
Yes, thank you, Aaron, for inviting me back, and thanks to everyone who participated. I enjoyed this a great deal, and I hope that some of you got some important takeaways from our talk today.
Very good. All right. Well, with that, we'll wrap up Beyond Compliance for today. Thanks everyone for joining us. That concludes this episode. Cheers.